Hello, I'm Dan Wood. I'm the TSC for refrigeration for LG. Working with the training department today, we're going to put together a video on R600a service procedures. We've been saying for a couple of years it was coming, and it is now going to be here by the end of the year. I've got a couple of products that were sent to me that we're going to go through, and we're going to show you how to safely service R600a products. Now, there's a document you should become aware of. It's from AHAM, the Association of Home Appliance Manufacturers, and it's called the Safe Servicing of Household Appliances with Flammable Refrigerants, Recommended Practices. This was a document that was put together working with all the manufacturers here in the U.S., LG, Samsung, Whirlpool, Electrolux, you name it, they were on it. And the group came together to come up with some standards for safety. And I'm incorporating them into our R600a service procedure today. Now, I will say things are subject to change. When I get to something and ain't quite in concrete yet, I'll let you know, hey, this may change a little, but until we get those changes, we're going to go with what we have. I would say probably 80% of this is rock solid. It's not going to change, maybe even 90. But I want to be upfront with you. Now, today we're filming out in my lab. So you may hear some noises in the background because just outside my walls is the warehouse. So as we go through, if you hear something strange, hey, this is where I had to work today. Now, when you're servicing an R600 product or a product containing R600a refrigerant, isobutane, what you want to do first, if you get to the customer's house, and it's a no-cool, first thing we want you to do is open the refrigerator door and look at the data plate and see what refrigerant is in the product. If the product says it has R600a in it, what you're going to need to do is get your refrigerant leak detector, and we have chosen to use this one. It's a Inficon GasMate, and it's set up to pick up flammable refrigerants, to include isobutanes. And what the procedure has you do is, first thing is turn on your meter, and it's going to scream just like any other leak detector. It'll make a lot of noise. And in about 30 seconds, this will go down to about a beep a second. Now, once it gets to its detection stage, you were to go all the way around the unit at floor level and search for a refrigerant leak. R600a is heavier than air. When there's a leak, it's going to fall to the ground and then begin to spread. So if I was in the front of the refrigerator, I would start down at the bottom of the front, moving slowly around the front. I would work my way down the sides. And definitely around the back. Now, once I have decided this refrigerator is safe, that I don't have a leak, you're not done with your detector. The detector should then be placed on the floor where the nozzle is at ground level. And what this is doing is it's acting as a monitor. So while you're working, if you create a leak, that is your first line of defense. You're going to see a video in just a few seconds. It's going to show you what we did was release somewhere between a half and 1 gram of R600a and hit it with a striker and you'll see the results. This refrigerator has 52 grams of R600A. Eventually, they're going to let us go up to 150 grams in a refrigerator. You will see by the fire that happened with just somewhere between a half and 1 gram that you don't want to be sitting on the floor and have multiple or a lot of R600A hit the ground and you're sitting there and it ignite. It's all about safety. Now, if you've determined that the area is safe, you would now go in and diagnose the refrigerator. Now, for the purposes of this class, we're not going to get into diagnosis. I'm just going to tell you, we're about to replace a compressor and a dryer. Now, I wish I'd left the unit virgin, but we had to run some other checks, so I have tapped into it. But we're going to talk to you and walk you through everything you would do in the home. Now, once I've certified it safe and you bring in all your equipment. Now, lock ring is the only thing we're recommending that we do our R600A service procedures with. This gas is very flammable. As you saw during the little video, it just took an arc from a striker or a spark from a striker to get it to light up. Now, we have decided to use the lock ring, Vulcan lock ring recovery bag. And in conjunction with Vulcan lock ring, we have developed the LG R600a service procedure. They were our partners on this. We're going to be showing you how to use our recovery bag, and we're also using the Vulcan lock ring charging station as we do this repair. And we'll go through and show you the ins and outs. So as I'm talking to you before I get going, I'm trying to also give you some information. Now, if you have determined, and I know the beeping in the background's becoming a little bit of a pain, what I may do is ask Madison, our expert videographer again, if he can block that out. And if he can, maybe we don't have to listen to it the whole way through. But in the home, guys, you're going to have to leave that on. That is your only early warning that you've got a problem. So for right now, I'm going to turn it off. Now, some other things you need to know. There are two ways to recover, well, there's three ways to recover the refrigerant. Only one way that LG is using, and that's going to be the bag. Now, many of you may have attended some R600 training, or you may have seen some videos where they show this 10, 15-foot hose is thrown out the window. That is another possibility. We decided not to go that route because some apartments and condos don't have windows in the kitchen. Number two, if you're going to put it out the window, you have to determine nothing underneath that window is a risk of flame or ignition. If you happen to be in a house where there's a basement, you got to make sure there's not a basement window there, that you're actually letting the isobutane, since it's heavier in air, hit the ground, run into the basement, where it could be ignited by a coal-fired burner or oil burner or a hot water heater, etc. You get the picture. So we've decided to use the bag. There will eventually be some kind of recovery machine brought into the country, but we all decided we'd stick with the bag. All right, now, so the bag you've got to have. You'll notice the gauges I'm going to be using. We'll get some close-up. These gauges are specifically designed for use with R600A. R600 runs on a refrigerator freezer about 11 inches of mercury. That's 11 inches in a vacuum. And you'll notice the gauges we're going to use have about a quarter of the gauge is negative pressure. So it's very easy to read the pressure, and that's going to come in when you need to diagnose the unit. Another thing, this unit has been off for quite a while. And what you'll notice here, we're actually sitting at about 11 PSI equalized pressure. And guys, this is a brand new, perfectly running unit. Now the room in here today is about 72 degrees. The other day I shot a video similar to this on the other unit I've got because we need to shoot a quick video on that one. And it was 67 in the room and our equalized pressure was 7 PSI. Most techs would look at that and say, I got a leak. Not with R600. It's very low pressured refrigerant. Guys, it boils at about 10.5 degrees. And R134 boils at minus 15.5, 16 degrees. So there is a big difference here. Now, so the gauges, I'm not saying you have to get R600a gauges, but when it comes to diagnosis, I'm going to say it's very highly recommended. The other new piece of equipment you've got to get is a vacuum pump that is sparkless. That was when AHAM did these rules. We sent our guidelines to OSHA, to CPSC, to EPA, and all those agencies had input. And one of the inputs was the vacuum pump. And if you happen to be working with an A2L refrigerant air conditioning, you have to have a sparkless recovery machine. Today we're only dealing with R600a. So the only special big piece of equipment is the leak detector for hydrocarbons and the vacuum pump, which is sparkless, and it should be certified for A2L, A3 refrigerants. Some other things as we go through I'll bring up to you. One is a fan. Now, I'm in a quite large shop. So when you're working on R600a, one of the things we talk about is working in a well-ventilated area. Now you can ventilate the area. I've got double doors going out to the warehouse. I've got one of those open. I'm in this huge lab. We've got plenty of airspace. If you happen to be in a tight galley kitchen, what you're going to want to do is about 9-10 feet away from you, set a fan up on the floor, blowing towards you. You're just wanting the air to mix around so we don't hit that perfect little spot where you've got enough fuel, oxygen, ignition source, you get a fire or a bang. Now, I don't want anyone to get worried and say, oh my gosh, isobutane, R600a, Guys, if there was a bar graph I was looking at and it showed natural gas, it showed propane, it showed isobutane, and then it showed another chemical which we carry on our trucks every day, and its danger was about yay long when all the other ones only had about 3/4 of an inch, and that's acetylene. The acetylene we carry in our torches is probably 5 or 6 times more volatile than the R600a. So we all learn safe procedures with acetylene. All we've got to do is learn the safe procedures with R600a. All right. Now, when you get ready to service, we've decided we need to get into this. You're going to unplug the refrigerator, and this is an area that may change. But what they told us was, during the servicing procedure, the unit needed to remain grounded. Well, in a lot of new homes, the water pipe bringing the water to the ice maker is no longer copper or steel. So working with our electronics people here, we came up with a little device. This is handmade. It's an extension cord repair kit, you might want to call it. It's a male and female end with one piece of 14 gauge stranded that is only connected to the ground. So what I'm going to do is plug this into the wall, my refrigerator into this end, the unit remains grounded. But what that does mean is you, the technician, first and foremost, either using a meter, or if you have a little wall detector like this, plug it in and make sure your plug is properly polarized and grounded. On this particular one, if these two over here light up, means I'm on a properly polarized and grounded receptacle. So I'm going to come over here, I've got a little power strip, and I plug it in, and I find out I'm good. So what I'm going to do is plug this in. And I made these with about 10 feet of wire. The reason is they're suggesting that anything you have to plug in and out should be several feet away from the refrigerator. Again, remember, we're dealing with a flammable refrigerant. We don't want any sparks. So I gave myself 10 feet of power cord. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to plug my refrigerator in. So the only thing I've done is ground this unit back to the house. Okay, now that I've got my appliance grounded, I'm I wanted to back up for a second and talk about the leak detector again. Guys, I cannot stress this strongly enough. The refrigerant leak detector has to be certified to pick up hydrocarbons. And you cannot use your refrigerant, i.e. R134A 22410. And here's why. On those other, a CFC, HCFC, HFC leak detector, the very tip of the probe either has a hot probe in it or a sparker. Guys, you're going around a flammable refrigerant. That's your ignition source. So never use a standard refrigerant leak detector when you're looking for a hydrocarbon, in other words, R600a leak or any flammable leak. So keep that in mind. The leak detector you're using has to be rated for hydrocarbons. It should be intrinsically safe. All right, so I've already verified that we're in a safe area. I'm in a large enough room. I don't need to have a fan on, but I believe we're going to put a picture in here showing you an example of having a fan blow across the work area. I've laid out all my tools. I do have my sparkless vacuum pump here. So what I'm going to do is, the way we're shooting this video today, you can either sit here for maybe the next 2.5 hours and watch the whole thing, or we're also going to do this like we've done before. We're going to take this introduction to R600a, then we're going to do evacuating the system, then we'll do replacing the compressor and dryer, then we'll do leak check with nitrogen, then we'll do evacuation, and then we'll do charging. So that way, once you've seen the whole video, or you fast forward through enough of it and you say, okay, I got this down, then when you get, there's some specifics like the charging and the evacuation. You might need to see that in its entirety, or you may need to see it more than once to get it down pat. Guys, the whole idea here is I've been able to work with this. For those of you that know me from the training department, I was kind of the point man for the R600 for the last about 4 years. So I've really got to work with this. I've got to work with lock ring. I've got to work with R600. And I haven't had an incident. I respect it the same way when 35 years ago when we had ammonia in the field, and ammonia is coming back. You just have to respect what you're working with. And if you do, there's no problem at all. So I feel very comfortable working around it. It's a safe refrigerant as long as you're careful with it. Now, just to throw at you, what happened if, when I was going around the refrigerator, the leak detector screamed at me, there is a refrigerant leak? At that point, I need to warn the homeowner, open up the house, and get some ventilation going. Because just like you've learned in science over the years, you have fuel, you got another circle with oxygen, you got another circle with ignition. Right where those three come together, that little bitty sweet spot, is where we can get either flame or explosion. All right? As long as I keep enough air movement through here, nothing's going to happen. And that's why you need that, what I said earlier, a well-ventilated room. Now, if you're in a kind of medium kitchen, maybe crack a window and open a door so you get a little cross breeze going. Put your fan on. These are some of the things that we're trying to make you understand how this works. Now, before you begin, you are going to need to alert the customer that for the next 2 to 3 hours, however long it takes you to do a seal system, there can be no smoking in the immediate area. And even though there was not a definite size put around, I'm going to tell you 3 meters, about 10 feet. So 10 feet around the appliance. I don't want any toasters used, any stoves, ovens. If there's a hot water heater in the kitchen, of course, we can't even do the job because I can't be that close to an ignition source. So you need to let the homeowner know, especially if they're smokers. And if you're there late in the afternoon, you need to let them know, hey, for the next 3 hours, nothing can be hot in the kitchen, which means no stove. You can't be cooking in here while I'm doing this. Let them know these dangers or precautions before you get started. I don't want you to get halfway through this and all of a sudden, well, it's 4 o'clock, I'm going to start cooking dinner. We need to let the customer know, no, we can't do that. This is what I need. and we're going to have to schedule our calls maybe a little different when we're doing an R600A. All right, so I've already told Madison he can't get anything hot. He's got to, be careful in here with me. So they put us in here by ourselves. No, but we've got a safe area. I have no ignition sources anywhere near me. All my ovens are turned off in our lab. Now, the other piece of equipment you're required to have, a Class B fire extinguisher has to be on the job with you. Now, we have asked, and I don't know which government agency mandated this, but we have asked them how big. I'm hoping they go with one about the size of a thermos. I've got the one that was off the wall in the warehouse and brought it in here, but you do have to have a Class B fire extinguisher with you where you could reach it. So I've got one right here beside the refrigerator. I've got my new compressor and dryer. I've got my recovery bag, my lock ring kit, my meter, my gauges. I've got my seal system tools, micron gauge, vacuum pump, Vulcan lock ring charging station, and my nitrogen. So I'm ready to get going. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, a couple of things other I want to talk to you about. When I said at the beginning you would open the refrigerator door and look at the data plate. Let's say for whatever reason the customer had pulled the refrigerator out. Guys, every unit that has R600A will have a warning sticker similar to the one right here. And it has the symbol for R600A, flammable refrigerant, and it has a warning, risk of fire, flammable materials, isobutane, R600, cyclopentane. So this will be here. Also, on your compressor, and I'm sure they'll get a close-up of it later, but the same sticker, this symbol, is on all R600 compressors, and up here in the data of the compressor, it will say R600A. So the compressors are definitely specific for that refrigerant. Now, the other thing you'll find, and this is one of those things that still isn't as down pat as I'd like it to be, on the process tubes that a technician would be expected to pierce the system, like I have here, these tubes will have a colored paint. I believe it is to be red, that when you're through, they have to be recolored red. They can either be painted or a plastic like shrink wrap. We'll come up with something once this gets a little further along. But the manufacturers are to put a colored tip on the process tubes to let you know, one, hey, this is a flammable refrigerant, and two, this is where you go in the system at. So these actually had some little plastic caps, and I don't know, they were about yay long. I think they're supposed to be a little longer now. Like I said, the regs are still waiting for everything to be posted. So they have to be replaced once we're done. Now, I had to go into this unit earlier. I wish I'd left it a virgin for the video, but sorry. What I would do now is go ahead and put a temporary access port on both my high side and my low side and attach to my gauges. And these are the R600 gauges I was telling you about. We're currently at about maybe 12. I was looking at it upside down a while ago. We're right at 12.5 PSI equalized pressure. Now, if I'm going to remove the refrigerant, like I said, I'm in a big enough room, I don't need the fan going. So once I've tapped into the system, making sure my gauges are closed, I'm going to get my recovery bag, unscrew the cap, and attach my yellow hose to the recovery bag. Now guys, the bag has a Schrader in it, so when you put it in and you get ready to take it outside, you don't have to worry it's not coming back out unless you remove the core, and we'll talk about that later. So you're going to go ahead and attach to your temporary recovery bag, And then you'll notice the bag's empty. All right, with R600A, approximately 50 to 60% of the charge can remain in the refrigerant oil in the compressor. So when you open this up, you're going to open this up, and there goes my R600. You're going to open both sides, and when we're through, this bag might get an inch. It's not going to boom, but you need to let the refrigerant flow out into the bag for 10 minutes. And okay, and I'm sure he'll speed this up so you don't have to sit here and watch me for 10 minutes. But while this is happening, like right now, we're already reading 0 and 0. I can still hear it hissing in a little. What you're going to need to do during this 10 minutes, do not use any type of external heat source, flammable refrigerant. You can't be using a heat gun back here. But what you can do, I don't know if you can pick that up on my mic, but as soon as I bumped it, we started hearing the hiss of refrigerant going back in to the bag. And it's still hissing. So during the 10 minutes, maybe every 1 or 2 minutes, just reach over and bump your compressor. And what you're doing is you're breaking loose the R600 from the oils. And you're going to let this go for 10 minutes. Now, during this time, we don't need to be sitting here just watching the clock. What we can be doing is going ahead and removing our electrical from the compressor. Now, in the event you are working on a refrigerator that has a capacitor in the machine compartment, you must first discharge that capacitor prior to beginning the recovery of the refrigerant. Now this one didn't, so I didn't have to worry about it, but if you are, you need to go ahead and get that taken care of. I got my electrical off, remove my ground wire. Now, the other thing I can do while I'm waiting my 10 minutes out is I know I'm going to have to replace my dryer. It's a whole lot easier to clean before I cut. So go ahead and clean your copper up where you're going to cut it to put your new dryer on. I'm going to also need to cut my suction line. So I'm going to come over here. And cut it up high enough that you can put your lock ring on it. Now, as we all know, every unit's a little different. This is a small top mount R600A. Just happened to be the first R600A product I got that we could shoot some video on. R600 will be used probably in our full line. Right now we're waiting for the EPA to raise the official limit from 57 grams to 150 grams. But right now we happen to know for a fact there are a couple of kimchi machines coming into the country that are already R600A. They're below the 57 gram limit, so they can come in now. Now, just so you'll know, you'll notice my leak detector is here, and I've got it run back over there. I put it as far back and put a little towel. Hopefully the noise, I can barely hear it now. In the customer's home, I would not. I would want to hear it loud because I want to know if I've got a leak. But for the purposes of the video, we've kind of muted it down so that you could hear what was being said. Okay, our 10 minutes has passed. I've bumped it. I'm not hearing anything. 10 minutes has gone by. We've got our refrigerant out. So what we're going to do, first, we're going to go ahead and close our manifold gauge set. And we're going to remove our common hose off of the bag. At this point in time, guys, I would take and carry this outside, take a core removal tool with you or cap. You do not want to put one of these caps on this bag because when you roll it up to store it, the ends are sharp. This is a smooth, easy cap. Always replace it with a smooth one. Do not put the sharp one. These bags are a little bit expensive and we don't want to have to be replacing them every day. So at this point, I would take this bag outside, make sure I'm away from any ignition source, pull my cap, use my core removal tool, remove the core. Starting at the opposite end, I would begin releasing the isobutane into the atmosphere, which is perfectly legal. Once I have fully gotten all the refrigerant out of my bag, I'd put my core back in it, the soft round cap, and go ahead and leave this in the truck. I'm done with it. So that's how you get the R600a out of the refrigerator. Now, at this point, since the R600's already been removed, I can go ahead and remove my hoses, and for right now, I'm done with them. Now, I always make it a practice to screw my hoses back onto my manifold, because one, you don't get trash in there, you don't get moisture. If you happen to be where I was in Houston for years, it was high humidity, so you try to keep your hoses clean, hook them back up, and move them out of your way. Now, I can remove my access valves. One of the things I should have done while I was waiting is remove my clips instead of boring you with removal of 4 clips. Three. And 4. Now, what I'm going to want to do is remove my dryer and my compressor. Now, at this point, take your tubing cutter and you can remove your compressor. What you want to do is cut as close to the sweat joint as possible so you don't lose any tubing, but at the same time cut far enough up that you're not grabbing any of the solder because that would prevent your lock ring from going on smoothly. So I came up just above the solder joint. When I first started, I was a little lower, but I caught a bubble of solder and I just moved up a little. Now, once you've scored the steel, a pretty good score, a lot of times you can remove, take a pair of pliers or something, and slightly twist, and if you've scored enough, it will snap perfectly, just like I did there. At this point, I can now lift my compressor out, and what you're going to want to do is have your pinch off tool. You're going to want to pinch the ends of your compressor. Now, remember, I said this compressor could hold 50 to 60% of your charge, so you're going to want to make sure you're getting a good pinch. Now, also put a hole in the process tube, so I'm going to pinch behind it also, and I'm going to kink that over and get those pinched up. Remove my grommets. Okay. Now, at this point, guys, take the compressor outside. The dryer, you can cut it out later and throw it in your trash box, but the compressor, since it has part of your charge left in it, go ahead and get it out of the house. We're discussing ways of sealing or whatever. We'll get back with that. But for right now, do a good pinch off and go ahead and take this out of the home. Now, if there was a way you could put it in a box beside your truck until you're ready to pack it up, a lot of the newer vehicles now have a cabinet where your flammables are supposed to go that's vented to the outside. That's where I'd put this compressor in its box until I was ready to dispose of it. But pinch this up real well and get it outside. Remove our dryer. Yes, I forgot to clean this one. Now, when you cut the dryer out, when you cut the cap tube, keep your hands on it. Don't let it fly around. Believe it or not, we just recently had to inspect a refrigerator. It was an RA that evidently when the guy cut it, it flipped and actually hit the mastic on top of the compressor, and he had a restriction that couldn't be found. When we got it back, the guy that did the autopsy, the evaluation, he found black mastic stuck in the end of the cap tube. So guys, control it and move it to where it's not going to be hurt or get in the way of anything. Seems silly, but anything we can do to help prevent an RA takes care of our customer, makes us look better as techs. All right, we've got everything cleared out. I'm gonna put my two grommets back where they go. Move my electrical out of the way. Now, I know for my lock ring dryer, I'm gonna need a 4 to come from here to my dryer, and then I'm gonna need a 4-2 to put my dryer to my cap tube, which is this one. So we've got those two out of the way. There's my dryer. And I have my new compressor. Okay, you get your new compressor, remove your stubs, and go ahead and clean all your joints. Now, prior to this, guys, we're not going to reteach lock ring, but you would have to go use your micrometer, measure, and get your right sizes. I've already got the sizes out to go in here. If you need training on lock ring usage, in eLearn, we have a whole section devoted to lock ring, from measuring the individual sizes, what they do. You've got some that are from union to union, some go from a big to a little. So you got reducers, you got unions, and then you also have the ones that go from a full size down to a cap tube. So I've got my lock rings out, I've got my joints are all cleaned up for the lock ring. And what we're going to do is we're going to put this in, put our dryer in. I've already got my dryer sitting ready, and go from there. So let's get started. All right, got my compressor out now, and like I said, guys, we're chopping this into separate videos so that we can have this basics, how to evacuate, how to change a compressor, how to well, I shouldn't have said evacuate, how to take the refrigerant out, how to temporary capture, then how to change a compressor, how to pressure check the system, evacuation, then charge. So got my compressor out, got my dryer, I've cleaned up my stubs, I just temporarily put them back. Leak detector's going in the background, still in the shop. So got my lock rings all out so I can get this out of the way. And I do try as I work, not only for the video, but also in the home, is you don't need something, kind of put it up to get it out of your way. You don't want a lot of clutter. Make sure everything stays right. All right, so 3 lock rings and 2 on the dryer. So let me get to where I can get this in. So already pulled these off and cleaned them. Trash. Now, one, two, three, and 4. Good. All right. On the lock ring tool, as always, make sure your pins stay in the right position. And just like using a torch, I like to start from the back and work forward so that I don't interfere with anything. Let's see. Well, got all my ends down and forgot who went where. Okay. Alrighty. Lock prep. And get my towel over here. Okay. Okay, got it to spin. If you notice, I pushed everything in so that it would keep tension on itself. Good looking connection. Now, the more we work with lock ring, the more we find out things. And the biggest reason we have leaks with our lock ring is after making connections, guys tend to move until they move it before the lock prep's had a chance to set. Now guys, we've put out numerous times that the lock prep needs to have about 7 minutes on copper and about 9 on aluminum, and that also depends on the temperature in the room. So I try to give at least, say, 7 to 10 minutes after I make a joint before I do anything. So just keep that in mind as we go through. Now, unlike using a torch, and believe it or not, we've seen a problem here, you don't have to remove the Schrader pin, but keep in mind, from the factory, they're not tightened down. So just because you're using lock ring, don't forget, you need to take and fully screw the Schrader pin into the valve and tighten it. Okay. And that's why you have a towel here, so when you make a little spill. Okay. Okay. Remember, you can cut this down if you don't need all the length. You don't have to leave. We always leave a lot of excess because we don't know what you're going to have in your particular area. Just remember, if you cut the dryers down, always leave that 30 millimeters there to work with for your lock ring. And a lot of times I will cut them down just so they fit back in the original spot that the factory dryer was in. Once again, don't forget to tighten your Schrader down. You can do it before or after you put it on, but since I'm not using a torch, I'm going ahead and putting it on now. Tightening it up is just one thing I don't have to worry about forgetting or having to work with it later. Remember, the Schrader always goes on the entrance side. So what we've got to do here is we need our 4-4, which will go here and here. And then we're going to need a 4-2 because that's going to go here. And our cap tube is going to come in. And now that I think about it, let me dry fit the cap tube for a minute. Now, when you put the cap tube in, remember, it needs to come all the way through the lock ring and extend out the other side. And that means you got to get more of the cap tube perfectly straight, which sometimes is fun to get. There, made it through. So what I'm going to do is back this off a little bit, add my lock prep, slide it back in, twist it, add my lock prep. Don't get it near the end because I do not want to clog my cap tube with lock prep. Twist it. Lock prep. Lock prep. Okay. This is also where you should give a thought about how you want your Schrader. How do you want it positioned so you won't have to be trying to bend the entire dryer. It's a little awkward, but I'm trying to make sure we get good shots here. All right, a little trouble with that last one, had to reseat, but looks like we got a good one. I'm not going to mess with this. Now, when we say that 7 to 9 minutes, guys, that's from your last joint. So right now, I can either sit here and twiddle my fingers for 7 to 9 minutes, or I could do something that I need to do anyway. I can go ahead and put my electrical back on. Now, I can also do this when we're pulling the unit down into a vacuum, but I could carry tools out, whatever you need to do, but always, when you're on these jobs, try to use your dead time to your benefit. Still got a few minutes, so again, things that need to be done, get done. Put your clips back on your compressor. Now, if this machine compartment was real tight, I'd put my gloves on because it's a cut area. But seeing as how open this one is, I'll have to get that fourth clip a little later. All right, 10 minutes is up. Now, a couple of more things we're going to do here. Return your dryer to its location if you can here, because I moved it over just a little. What you'll find is this area right in here, generally, if you can't get it exactly back in the same hole, you can come over just a little bit and just put it right here. Secure the dryer down. Okay. Now, what we're wanting to do first is pressure check our machine. We're wanting to make sure that I didn't leave a leak. So what we're going to do is hook up our gauges to the high and low side of the machine. Bring our nitrogen over. Remember, don't be sliding stuff around. Heavy tanks on a customer's floor, you can damage your floor. Now, nitrogen. Guys, for those of you that use nitrogen, we found out you have less reclaim than the guys that don't. Because if you're using nitrogen to pressure check your joints, you're finding a leak right then. You're fixing it, and you're going down the road. We've got techs that still aren't using nitrogen the way that they should. They're thinking, well, that's just 5 minutes of wasted time. No, the 3 hours you come back to do your reclaim and have to put another compressor in because it sucked moisture in, or maybe you found out, well, you had a bad evaporator too. Now you've cost us a second compressor, a second dryer, and now an evaporator, and 3 hours of your time. Take the time to pressure check. Use of the nitrogen. Make sure this is run out. Never stand directly in front of it. Turn your nitrogen bottle on. Now, on the R600 gauges, you'll notice my low side gauge only goes to 58 psi. Now the high side goes to 160, which means I can't allow the pressure to get too high on this side. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to open just my high side, and I'm going to slowly start putting pressure in. Now the reason you only open one side is to see if the other side rises. That lets you know you didn't put a restriction in the system. So right now I've just found out that, I told you I didn't want to get lock prep on that cap tube so I wouldn't start a restriction. I didn't, because I just entered the refrigerant in on one side and it's blowing around to the other. So my low side's coming up, my high side. Now I can't let this exceed 58 psi. If I do, I'll ruin this gauge. So what I'm going to do here is once it goes on up and I'm already satisfied I don't have a restriction, I'm going to go ahead and remove my low side. Now I'm going to go ahead and take my high side and I'm going to run it up to about 150 psi and stop. Now, I put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 joints in. So I'm going to want to come in here and bubble check the 5 joints that I made. Now, again, your towel comes in handy. Suction line, no bubbles. High side line, no bubbles. Or I shouldn't have said suction, but process tube. Suction. Cap off the dryer. And now my high side to the dryer. always like to clean up my soap bubbles, especially if you're using those green fluorescent. I don't want them to look like a dye dryer, the dye in a dryer at a later time. So it doesn't take but a second. Clean them up. And now I've pressure checked my unit. This way, when I go into getting my vacuum, I don't have to worry about spending 20 minutes to find out, oh crap, I left a leak. I've just determined I have no leak. All right. Again, close your nitrogen bottle off. And you can release the nitrogen into the room. At this point, you want to go ahead and back off your regulator. Like I said, I like to move everything, get it to where I'm not going to need it. Now, Madison's going to get some closer shots of this to include in our video. But guys, we're going to now go into the charging station and show you what we've got here. Now, what the charging station is going to allow us to do is fully charge this unit without releasing any refrigerant into the customer's home. You're not having to burp a hose to fill it up before you charge. And at the end, you're not going to have we're not going to have any of that. So kind of watch as we go through. The kit consists of a T valve, or a T with a valve on it. There's a refrigerant scale, a bottle of refrigerant, and your charging piece. Now, the charging piece, this is actually two pieces. This valve screws onto the can, and if you were charging under 40 grams, you could actually charge it as a gas. But if you're charging over 40 grams, and I am, you screw it onto this base, and now you charge it as a liquid. The reason we do that, if you don't charge it as a liquid, when you charge it as a gas, this can is going to frost. That weight is going to throw off your weight going into your refrigerator. Guys, R600 is more critical on the weight than 134A was. That's why the scales we have are more accurate than the scales you're used to carrying. So this scale is plus or minus half a gram. The old scales, I think, were plus or minus 2. So we need the accuracy. So what we're going to do is get ready to set this up. Give me just 1 second. All right, now, during the first part of the video we shot, I gave you a lot of little admin things or information about R600, pressures that it runs. What I'll also do is we'll go back into that video. These cans, guys, eventually the idea is you'll buy your R600A at the local supply house. Just about every manufacturer of R600 I looked at, they have about 420 gram, 14 ounce cans. So what you'll have to do, what I can do for you as soon as I actually have a second can we've used on many of our repairs, and it feels like there's just a little in it. So for this video, I want to use a fresh can, but I'll eventually, when this can empties, I'll give you the tear weight of the can. So when you're out on a job and you're going, you can look at it and say, well, I know the can weighs X, which means I've got Y left in here. And we'll put that in that first part of the video for you once we get there. But this is a brand new can, so I'm not going to have to worry about it. Now, what you do getting set up here. Right now, we need to evacuate our system. So, I've got my sparkless vacuum pump. Excuse me. Right now, I've got my sparkless vacuum pump. I've got my gauges, and I've got my charging system. So we're going to put this here, and we're going to get this all set up and explain what we're doing here. All right. Okay, we all know our yellow line is going to go to our vacuum pump via our micron gauge. So I'm going to go ahead, attach my micron gauge over here. And I know many of you have different setups, how you get this done in the field. Just go with what you have. All right, from there, we're going to come over here. And with the Vulcan lock ring kit, you've got a small hose. Pull the covers off. These covers, they're kind of like the hangers on the back of a manifold set. They're just to keep trash from getting in your hose. So you can pull the covers off. Just put them back on when you're done. You're going to attach this small hose to the very end of the T and screw it on. Now, the lock ring set comes with 2 quick connects. You're going to take this quick connect and attach it to the hose. Then push the button and remove the screw-on part, and you're going to take and attach this to the low side. So it tells you screw it on, not quite snug, push the button, stick it in, and then finish tightening. Guys, after you've done this a time or two, you'll get it to where you only have to go maybe a quarter turn to get it snug down. All right, then you're going to take your blue hose, your low side hose, and attach it to the open spot of the T. Now, get your other quick connect, attach it to your high side hose, remove the screw-on part, place it on your dryer, the high side access port, push down on the button, and plug it in. Then finish snugging it. So now, I'm attached all the way back. I'm not through. Now, you're going to take your refrigerant can, pull the cap off, and screw the can into the base. First, make sure this is turned off. Now guys, this little knurled knob on here, if you have gorilla strength, use your pinky. This is the only part that really can get damaged. If you over tighten it, you'll strip this knob off because that's a brass stem. So guys, just be careful with it. You don't have to nail it down, just finger tight. All right, take and screw your R600 can. You'll hear a small little sometimes. And then what you do, this is still off. We're gonna just set that on our scale. We're not even measuring yet. Now, we're hooked to high side, low side, all the way back to here and to our vacuum pump and micron gauge. So what we're gonna wanna do here is you're gonna want to open up your gauges, make sure you're turned on here, and you're also going to want to open this T valve. Now, I'm going to give you a quick rundown before I start the noise of the pump. what's going to happen is not only are we going to pull a vacuum on our system, we're going to pull a vacuum on this hose all the way back to the can. Once we're through with our vacuum, it held under 1,000. What we're going to do at that point, once we disconnect the vacuum pump, disconnect our high side, R600 is going to get charged on the low side. We're going to turn our scale on, zero it with this valve in the off position. We're going to pick the can up and open it, and we're going to get refrigerant to come all the way up to that T. We're going to set it back on the scale, and it's roughly going to have somewhere between, it says 3 and 10 ounces just about every time I've done it, or correction, 3 and 10 grams. This one, usually every time I've done it, I've had 9 to 11 grams have filled the hose. Okay, that's weight is part of our charge. Then when we open this, we're going to fill it up. And then when we're done, when we hit our exact charge, we're going to pick the can up, turn it off, and open the valve up one more time. And we're going to fire the unit up, and it's going to suck the remainder right out of our hoses for us. So you don't lose anything. You actually pull a vacuum back to the can, and you suck it all into the unit. So there's no loss in the customer's home. There's no guesstimation about how much did I lose in my hoses. We're putting the exact charge in, which is what's going to be required with R600A. All right, so we're open. I'm going to go ahead and turn on my micron gauge, and I'm going to turn on my vacuum pump. I'm going to turn on my gauges. My T-piece is open, so I'm sucking back to there. And now I can go ahead and get comfortable. But remember, this is also where I would be taking care of anything else I need to do. If I hadn't put my clips on, which I've still got one to put on, I could actually start taking stuff out of my truck that I'm done with. This dead time during the evacuation process, don't sit back here and twiddle your fingers. Use this to your benefit. A lot of guys say, well, I don't want to take anything out. I might have a leak. If you'd used the nitrogen, you should have already found the leak and fixed it. Right now, I'm just pulling a vacuum. And then I'm going to charge it, then I'm going to leave. All right. All right. I'm going to try not to do too much talking during this portion. In fact, we're going to bring this down. We're already at about 1,250 microns, and it's only been running a couple of minutes. What you're going to find out, and again, guys, if you're not changing your vacuum pump oil at least once a week, if you're doing 2 or more seal systems a week, you should be changing your vacuum pump every week, your oil. If you're not changing your oil, this process right here could take you 2-3 hours. Now, back here, I evaluate units that are brought back in, and many of them have been left open to the atmosphere. Sometimes with those, it does take me 2, 3, 4 hours to get a good vacuum. But usually, we're talking 30 minutes to get a good vacuum down to 300 microns. I try to go a little below 500 and shut it, make sure it holds under 1,000. That's what we're looking for. But guys, I change my oil every week. So if you're not buying oil to replace your oil and you're complaining about long seal system times, that can be one of the issues. The other problem we've had, some of our GRTs have ridden with many of the techs. They're finding maintenance on the hoses, hose gaskets leaking, hoses leaking, manifold sets leaking. Guys, periodically, check your equipment. You can only get as good a vacuum as your equipment will allow. So change your oil, make sure you got good gauges. If your hoses need gaskets, get them, replace them. Keep your nitrogen stocked on your truck. These are all going to make your job easier, better, and go quicker. All right, we're down to 1,075. So we're just going to do some shortening of the video in just a second. So hold tight. All right. Now, through the magic of being able to compress this, we pulled down to about 340 microns. We're sitting at about 705, been there for about a minute. Let it keep holding. And once we're good, we're going to go ahead and shut down, and we're going to close this valve. So I've kept my vacuum all the way to here. I've closed my gauges. I'm going to turn that off, turn my micron gauge off, and my vacuum is held to here. Now, what we're going to want to do is, one, I need to untie from here so I can move a little bit easier. Now, guys, if you've watched any of our training, you know that this is not a linear compressor. This is actually a BLDC compressor. But the unit's been down. It's going to be 24 hours before your pressures are right. You don't need in on the high side. So the nice thing about these quick connects, just make sure your gauges are off, your T-piece is shut, push the button and pull. I didn't lose my vacuum. There was no shh. So go ahead and disconnect your high side and cap it up, because we're done with the high side. And put my quick connect back up, and I can connect this hose up. Now, if you were to leave your high side on, here's what's going to happen to you. For it to measure pressure, refrigerant's going to have to go fill this line up, and you've got a critical charge. So when you're done, if you can't get the refrigerant in this hose back in the refrigerator, you've just left it undercharged, and R600's critical. So we don't need in there. The high side pressure is not going to tell you anything for the first 24 hours that's remotely interesting. So disconnect. Now I'm still connected to my low side. I have a vacuum all the way back to here. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take and turn on my scale. It's going to give you all kind of numbers, blah, 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 blah. Then it will go to 0. Then you're going to hit the 0 and the tare button. It's going to give me 0.0. Now always make sure you're set to grams. This unit, I checked the data plate, it needs 52 grams of refrigerant. Now, it's zeroed. I'm going to pick up the bottle and I'm going to open my refrigerant. And then I'm going to set it right back down on the bottle, on the scale. And today it took 13 ounces. Or correction, 13 grams. Guys, I'm sorry, I've worked in ounces for 30 years, but 13 grams. So the way this procedure works is you're going to open this T valve and allow about half your charge into the refrigerator. So 26. So I'm going to open up and watch my scale. And I wound up with 30. So you don't want to go way much, but you want about half your charge in there. Now, once you've allowed it to go in, now what you're wanting to do is plug your refrigerator in. So if you remember, my refrigerator was plugged into a grounding strap. So I'm going to unplug it from the grounding strap, and I'm going to plug it in. Now, this particular refrigerator, Its startup sequence is a little different, so we're not worried about that. I've just got to wait for it to come on. My experience with this refrigerator, it takes about 2 minutes for the boot up procedure. So we're going to sit here and wait for the unit to come on. And Madison will shorten this down. All right, we're still waiting for the compressor to come on. But what I did do is we unmuted the sensor, the leak detector, because I wanted you to see what you'd be hearing the entire time. Now, also I wanted you to see that while we're working this and I disconnect, that we're not losing any gas. So I went ahead and put the noise, the audio back into it so you could hear it. And remember, R600a, like that little fire we showed you earlier, once it hits the ground, it starts spreading out. So by having your probe right beneath where I'm working with the gases, that's why it's there. All right, our compressor just fired up, and you can see we've already pulled down into a vacuum. Now, my scale is showing 35.5. Now guys, this is where you've got to play with this little valve, because I've got to end this at 52 grams. So what you want to do is during this next part, just a quick on and off gave me 4.5 grams. That time I got 2.5. 2. So you've got to sit here and play with it until you learn where you're going to stop. I'm at 48.5, and remember I need 52 grams. 49, 51, 51.5, 52, 52. All right, now 52. What you want to do is, with this valve's off, you're going to pick this up and turn your refrigerant off. Now remember, you pre-charged this line and we had 13 grams. That pre-charge into the lines has got to get in the refrigerator. So now I'm going to open up and just bump the rest of it in. Go ahead and open it. Now you want to watch your gauge. Once this pulls down to as low as it'll go, which is probably going to be around 10 to 13 inches of vacuum, maybe even a little more, you let it get down there, then you're going to disconnect your refrigerant. Now you notice I disconnected and that meter's not screaming at me. If this would have been without the use of the quick connect, y'all all know that had been and we would have gotten probably a scream would have gone off because we would have had refrigerant falling. So I wanted to show you, and that's why I brought the noise back on, the audio, that by doing this and following the proper service procedures, you're not letting R600a isobutane fall into the customer's home where there's a potential arc source. And I know I put that valve cap somewhere. Here we go. Now, at this point I can disconnect my tools and equipment. The unit is running. I can turn my scale off. That's off. And that's where I just disconnected the bottle. Move it away from the area let it go back. And that's what I got. When I disconnected my bottle, evidently I didn't hear it, but evidently there was just enough whiff there, and that's why you leave your meter going while you're doing this repair. But I'm back into a safe zone. Everything is back to normal. Close up. All your equipment fits back in here that you used for charging. This closes down. Now, I've still got to put my board back cover on. Take, and just like on any other refrigerator, you want to bend your process tube up to where this unit doesn't have a back panel, it's open, but you still don't want it to stick out. Now, last thing, take a quick check around and make sure, now that the unit's charged, I'd check your lock rings again. Now, of course, this is going to be under a vacuum, so on the process tube and the suction side, you're not going to find anything. But we have no leak. So, servicing an R600a refrigerator seems like a lot of little steps, but really, it's kind of like doing any other refrigerator. Once you learn the steps, it's no big deal. Safety. Fire extinguisher has to be with you. The leak detector has to remain on. Because guys, as you saw in a little video of the fire, you're sitting behind it. Now, for the camera, I set kind of this way. Usually when I do a seal system, I'm right here. This is the way I sit. If I had a leak, and you take that little 1/2 to 1 gram flame we showed you, and let's say I had a leak I didn't know, it's hitting the ground, pooling up underneath me. That's why the leak detector stays on. That's why you check before you work. That's why if you're in an enclosed space, you have a fan blowing, moving air around the area. Excuse me. That's why you tell the customer, while you're doing this job, there can't be a heat source going. You just make the area safe, you perform your repair. When you're done, you got the unit back in operation. I've got heat on my discharge. I don't have a cold suction line. In fact, it's barely cool, but I do have heat on the discharge. And since this is a BLDC compressor, kind of like a recip, I'm going to feel the heat here. So that's R600a, the use of the Vulcan lock ring charging station, the use of a hydrocarbon leak detector, sparkless vacuum pump. And I've already moved it out, but the recovery bag. Now the recovery bag, all I did was take it outside, remove the core stem, rolled it up, and you can actually see the distortions in the air of the refrigerant pushing out. But keep in mind, button up that compressor real well and dispose of it accordingly. All right? On behalf of the LG Training Department, I'm Dan Wood. Have a great day. Be safe out there.